what I would like to do is go over a couple different hunts and talk about what a coyote does to the sounds that you play. I got 4 or 5 hunts here that I want to go over. I got coyotes coming out at 300-400 yards, and they came out to a certain sound, but then once they figured out, or once they entered the field, they decided, I don't like that sound anymore, and I'm going to leave. So knowing the distinction between when to play another sound and when to leave that particular call on, that's one of the things that I want to go over. In all the years that I've been hunting, it took a lot of times in the field to figure out, what they're saying and what they're going to do based on their body language. So this is one of the hunts that it was just a couple nights ago, even though it says the year is 14, I didn't put in 19. I took a first-time hunter out. I get calls all the time of guys messaging me on Facebook or messaging me and say, I've never killed a coyote, and I would like for you to take me out, and you can come to my property, and we'll go out, and you show me what to do. Well, this particular guy, he was a son of a cattle farmer in southern West Virginia, and he calls me and says, every evening, Shannon, there's 10 coyotes out in this field. Well, when I heard him say 10 coyotes, I kind of laughed because he probably hears 2 or 3 howling and thinks that there's 10. Well, I was wrong on this. There's 8 coyotes comes out of this one little tiny patch of woods. 4 comes out, and then 4 more comes in behind them after he burnt the barrel off my gun. So you can hear him talking in the background, and you can hear that he's very inexperienced. So whatever he says, don't pay no mind to it. I'll run this just for a second, and we'll stop, and I want to show you what the language of the coyote was telling me as to why I switched up and did what I did. So before I start this, I want to tell you what I'm going to do this year for you guys, the guys out there that watch us on Facebook and the guys that send the questions in. I've killed enough coyotes. I like taking people out. I like showing them how to get into it. Everything that I do this year is going to be educational. So with ATN, everything that you say and do is recorded on that scope. Everything's videoed through that scope. So my goal this year, when I come back here next year, if they let me come back, I'm going to have an educational video of every hunt that I do, and I'm going to talk through it as the coyotes are coming into my call. If I get them, I get them. If I don't, I don't. But you're going to know what I'm thinking during the interaction in the field. So you can hear, I walk into this field and he says this is where they come from. You hear that little chirp? That is a rat. That's what I play every single time I go to a new property. Very low volume. On my lucky duck call, if it goes up to 32, I think, I run first off 14, 15. And let me pause it here for a second. So you can hear that little chirping. 99% of the time people ask, what do you start out with? How do you approach a new property? Well, on this particular set, you can see that there's just a little tiny patch of woods in a huge field. Well, this little patch of woods was only about 5 acres in a 600-700 acre piece of property. You know pretty much where they're going to come from. There's some little draws in there that they can pop out of those draws. But we got the wind direction going left to right, and I put the call direct north. And you you'll be able to see here in a minute where the call is. I pointed that speaker directly where I wanted them to come from. A lot of times you can't do that because of the wind direction, but so I pointed it directly at the little section of woods just because I had a good wind for it, and I knew if they crosswinded me, they was going to have to come out to the right of that patch of woods, and I would be able to shoot somewhere between 100 and 125 yards. So let me start it again. So the first one pops out. You know, more than likely, he's the leader of the pack. He didn't really like what he heard. But his buddies were already coming out of there, so he decided he was going to come on out and investigate.
30 of them. I see with you. There's 30.
So the wind, if you're looking at these codes, the wind is coming from like left to right here. There's a draw. You can see there's a few little trees coming up this draw, and there's a fence there. So we know that they can't get through that fence because it is it's a mesh fence. They got to come around the end of that post.
There's more. There's more.
There's the call. So even though they're only 200, 250 yards right here, they hear the sound, it brought them out, but they're not interested in it. And I can tell that immediately. Their heads aren't up looking in my direction. They're just moseying around, trying to find something else to eat. They hear it, but they don't want it. I'm going to fast forward. So they're literally hung up at this point. And you guys hunt, you know they hang up. Most times if they hang up, they'll bark and go on. You know, I'm not coming over there. I don't care what you throw at me. Well,
They're coming up that ditch.
they disappeared into the ditch running smoke. They stay in this ditch for quite some time. Now I know they're not interested in anything that I'm playing. Now you can see he's going off in the other direction. He doesn't even acknowledge I'm there anymore. And he was the first one that popped out. But watch what happens when I seen that he was leaving, that he did not want that rat anymore. I switched over. Immediately I seen the one in the back, his head jumped immediately. Now he's looking. Now I know I got their attention again. Watch him break. So they went from not wanting anything to do.
Let him get all the way up to the call.
I'm trying to tell the guy, let him get all the way to the call, and I was going to howl.
The one to the left. Let him get all the way up.
All right, I'm gonna stop it right here. So just by switching up, and you know, when you first get into hunting, you would have let that rat play until they left the field, or you would have started, you know, howling at them, or I did it. You know, it took a long time to figure out what they wanted or when to do it. Just by switching that call up, all four of those broke immediately, and they're getting ready to get my call. That call's 35 yards standing in front of us, and we're in a wide open field. And you can see the body language of the first one. I knew it was game over at this point because he's going to get that call. So I started howling at him, trying to get him to stop, but he was not going to stop. And this is where the inexperienced hunter comes in, because if I was there by myself, I would have let these coyotes do what they were going to do, and they would eventually stopped out there. You know, it may have been 100 yards in the field. They may have stopped. You could have got on them and maybe killed a couple of them, but he got real happy with the trigger. Oh, it's not a call. Then the other one comes in. He decided he didn't want the call. Shooting at air now.
Why didn't you shoot?
So he said, that sucks. Why didn't you shoot? I asked him, I was like, why didn't you shoot when they were first coming in? Because I was telling him, shoot, shoot, shoot. I knew the body language of the coyote. He wasn't going to slow down. But that's one of the key things, is knowing what they're going to do when they pop out. You know, hunting out here, hunting in the mountains, hunting on the old strip jobs and everything. I come up last year after the show was over, and I wanted to see how hard it was to hunt West Virginia. I haven't hunted here. You know, I go out with the people every now and again, but I hadn't really hunted here in a long time, not since I got all this equipment. I went out with a boy, and I told him, like, you know, if they're here, we're going to call them in. We called in, and I'm not kidding, 20 to 30 different coyotes in one night. But the problem was, we killed one. And the reason is, in those big valley fields and on these old ridge roads, we would call them in and we would see them on the faces of the mountains coming to us. But once they got on our side of the mountain, they disappeared. Well, when they would pop up, they'd pop up right in our face, and by the time you got on them, they was already gone again. So I understand your struggle. I was so mad and frustrated by the time we got done that night. I was like, I'm never hunting West Virginia again. But let me go to another one with a different set real quick. Okay, this is one of my all-time favorite hunts. Again, the guy called me and he said, man, I would really like to go. I said, okay. I said, I'll take you. He said, I got some really good property, we're going to go hunting. So it's all timber. There's this little tiny field out there. We're standing on the edge of an old dirt road, and he says, I hear him back in here all the time. I'm like, okay. So we set up. The wind is blowing left to right again, and we scanned this field when we first got there, and the field was completely full of deer. So we're sitting there looking at the deer, and in the background, in the timber, I could see these two coyotes. We didn't even have to turn the call on. You could see the two coyotes going through the timber. They were circling around, coming into the field. So hurry up and run 10 yards, set the call out, and put it on this rabbit in distress. And you can see by the body language of the coyote, immediately, as soon as they heard it, they're coming. There's no question in my mind, they're going to come to us.
Oh, do it. Which one do you shoot? I'm letting you shoot.
So I told the guy, I'm going to let you shoot. I'm just going to video.
I see you do the right one, man. He's going quick. I want you to get away from these cables. I want you to come over here right. I'll get right here, in between the cables. Yeah, just let them come. They're gonna come right through that ditch, right up in that fence.
back, the body language right there. He turned his body to the left. When he done that, I knew he was not coming. He didn't like whatever I was playing, but the other one obviously does. Now, right now, this coyote is only 75 yards. And I continue to let the call play.
I'm gonna shoot that cable. He stopped. Come here, Dad. He's right behind that cable. Just let him walk right on up here to the call.
He knew exactly where that sound was. He's going to walk straight up to the call at 10 yards. Now, first I want a few questions on the last hunt before we go into this hunt. Does anybody have any questions on their body language or anything on that last hunt?
How long did you let the call run before you changed over when you seen the body movement change?
So when it came out of that ditch, and I seen that he was going to go to the other, there was only like a 2 or 3 minute period when they was coming up that ditch. As soon as I seen him come up the ditch, and I knew, by his language he was leaving there, that's when I was like, I'm going to have to go to another sound because this is not going to get it done. I usually, if they come out into the fields with your rat or a woodpecker or a bird of some sort, there's all kinds of different sounds on each one of those calls, whether you got foxcrow or lucky duck or whatever you may have. That's what I always start out at, low volume. And then after I go through that sequence, if nothing comes out, I'll play it for 2 minutes and I stop it. And I'll sit there for a minute or so, 2 minutes. I'll play it again for a couple minutes at a little bit higher volume. Say I start out on 15, I'll go to 17 or 18. And then I'll sit there for a few minutes, nothing. Then I'll go up to 20, 21 on my volume, and I'll play it for another 2 minutes. So I'm already, 6, 8 minutes into the set. And I haven't even howled yet. I haven't located. I haven't done anything. Just playing, something that if there's one close like those were, they're going to hurry up and come in and get something to eat. After I get done with that sequence, especially this time of the year, and if you're in the tournament, my suggestion is do that, and then go to a female howl, because this is when that tournament hits. I don't know if you know this or not, but February 14th there's a 7-day window for a coyote during their breeding season. From the 7th of February to the 21st of February, every female coyote comes in heat that's going to come in heat. There's only 14 days there, so you get 7 on each side of the 14th. It's not like a deer. A deer may come in October, December, November. A coyote has a 7-day window on each side of the 14th. So when we, during the tournament, you're going to want to play a female long howl. One thing I like about Lucky Duck, and you don't have to do this if you don't have one, but one thing I like about their call is that that thing can rotate on the bottom. I've used mine so much. This call is 4 years old now. Last year, it actually worked when it was 3 years old. It's limping around right now because I've rotated that thing so much. I'm definitely going to get a new one here shortly. But if I know that the coyotes are coming directly north, I'll angle that call straight at where I'm going to go. I'll play a female howl, and this is kind of what this time of the year. This is what I would do. Play a female howl. I'll rotate that call totally opposite, 180 from where I just howled to, and I'll play a male howl and make it sound like it's an interaction between a male and a female. From that point, I'll rotate it back around again, and I'll play a female, a whimper, or a chirp first. Female chirps. That's basically telling the males in the area that it's that time of year. then go to a female whimper. After that, then I'll go into, depending on what they do, if they make any sound, if they howl back at me, if they challenge me, or an interrogational howl, I'll do that right back at them. If a male challenges me and you can tell that it's a male, I'll male challenge him back. If a female does, I'll do the female. But whatever they're saying, that's what you should mimic this time of the year. If you go through that sequence and nothing comes in, this time of the year, my suggestion is give it 5 hard minutes on your pup distress and get to another set. I mean, that's what you should do for tournament stuff. In the mountains, you got to give it a little longer because they may be on that ridge and they got to go all the way down and come back up. Out here, I would give it 10 minutes for that last pup distress and then go to the next spot. But hunting here with those big deep valleys, you got to give everything a little bit more time. I would add a couple minutes on everything that you do just because it's a lot tougher here. Anybody else?
I have a rash of problems with coyotes hanging up. You hit a locator and it sounds like the woods comes alive around you. But for some reason I'm scanning thermal 360 degrees and they just don't seem to come into the fields.
So if they're talking to you and just say you howl, you throw a big male howl out there and he comes back at you and everything lights up around you. The best thing to do is throw an interrogation or a challenge back at him. And see if one of them, whether it be male or female, or if you can tell, see if one coyote answers you back. If one of them answers you back, he or she is the dominant one of the pack. If it's a female, then challenge back with another female. If they don't answer, then go to a rabbit or whatever food source you want to go to. Turn it at 3/4 volume and play it for just 2 or 3 minutes, and shut it off and sit there. If there's a bunch of them, sit there for 4 or 5 minutes and don't say anything. And depending on what call you have, go to a food fight. Make it sound like, oh man, there was a rabbit out there, and all of a sudden now they're fighting over him, and they'll come out. They'll at least pop themselves out of the woods when they hear that food fight and be like, oh, what is that? What's going on? We're missing out on something. And if you got your electronic calls and you play food fight, it sounds like something awful. Like what in the world? How is that going to call a coyote if it does? It's really designed for situations like that when you play that food fight, because they're like, I'm going to go investigate what's going on. That would be my biggest tip. If that don't work, pup distress. Because if they ain't coming out, if you play pup distress at the end of your set and there's not a coyote comes out, he's not coming out. Because that single call right there has probably killed more coyotes across the U.S. than anything else. It's just your dominant call at the end of every set. You should never leave without playing pup distress.
I feel like maybe they're just so educated that especially like up on a strip mine where everybody's up there calling, and it just seems like they'll howl back at you, but then it just goes dead, and it doesn't matter. I've sat there for 2 hours after, just quiet, just looking and scanning, and nothing ever comes out.
Try that food fight and see what it does for you.
Thank
No problem. Anybody else?
You ever call during the day or?
I do call it during the day in Kentucky because Kentucky's great law is you can't hunt at night with rifles. So I have some really good properties in Kentucky, and hunting in the daytime is a whole nother ball game than standing out in the middle of the field at night and coyotes coming here to there away from you before they even know you're in existence. One thing about hunting in the day is, you've got to have a background to where they're not going to isolate you out. That's your biggest thing. Last year during the seminar, I put something up with some of my buddies out in Kansas because there's literally nothing there for a background. They find little tiny pine trees and get inside the pine trees. Here, my suggestion would be, you know, if you don't have anything that you can really seclude yourself, you got to get in shadows. Shadows is the biggest part of daytime hunting. You know, you can tuck yourself back in a briar thicket, but if you got any kind of sun coming in and it reflects off, you know, your leg or your gun or your scope, or they're going to pick that up immediately when they're coming. You gotta find a shadow and get inside the shadow. They're you know, if you look around, you know, you got a place where you think they're going to come from. You know, whether it be a tree or a stump, or you got to get somewhere where they can't isolate you out, because their eyes are so good in the daytime as to where they're so bad in the nighttime. But yeah, I do hunt in Kentucky, and it's a lot more difficult in the daytime because, for one, you know, they're a nighttime feeding predator. They do run in the daytime, but most of the time they're sunbathing in the daytime. That's the reason everybody's went tonight. That's when it's the easiest to kill them. Anybody else? I'll give you a good laugh here. So I told him, I said, I'm going to let you shoot first, and you know, if for some reason you don't get it, then I'll take aim.
Did I miss you?
Did I miss him?
Nice shot.
And you wonder why we use ARs.
I didn't miss him that first time, did I?
Yeah.
Still.
So at this point, I decided I needed a 10-round magazine rather than a 5-round magazine. I'm reloading right here. He's still shooting. Cody's like, what are you doing? I'm putting another magazine in.
Hold your ears. I shot him.
He still thinks he's shot.
That's good.
I figured you would get a kick out of that. Any other questions? I like to take questions. I mean, that's the only way we learn. You know, most of my farms out there, I don't hunt the same farm, you know, once a month. But I can tell you, there's in my backyard, I have a 100-acre field in my backyard that my house butts right up to the field. Since November of last year, I've killed 19 coyotes out of that field. So that tells me it doesn't matter how much you hunt that piece of property, because the travel corridor of coyotes is a 5-mile radius. You may hunt there and you may spook a coyote, or you may shoot his buddy, or you know, you may educate one, but 2 or 3 days after that, it's not going to be, the same group of coyotes is not going to be there. So I don't think, you know, if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, I would have told you, don't overhunt your properties. You can overhunt them, obviously, if you just live on them. But if you hunt your property once every couple weeks, you're not going to hurt that property, because it's just a revolving door of coyotes. You guys know, just from being out there in the field, those nights that you howl and everything, and you know, it sounds like in the county lights up around you. All those coyotes that you heard that you know was a mile away, they're probably going to be on your property the next night. And you know how many there is now. I mean, it's the amount is overwhelming. You know, I'm out there a lot of my properties are right in behind subdivisions, and, you know, we'll walk through a subdivision to a farmer's field that, you know, the subdivision was probably a part of the farmer's field at one time. We'll walk through that, through their yards, and set up on the edge of their yards and, you know, call in 3, 4, 5 coyotes to their yard. There's so many coyotes anymore, it's, you know, that's the reason that you know, especially at home, you know, you see those guys in Indiana and Illinois that, you know, they killing 10, 14, 15 coyotes a night. It's just there's an overwhelming number of them. But
Would you use the same call setup you use, you know, set up the same, you know, you do get, sometimes you use the same procedure that you did for everything?
yeah, because those coyotes that was there, you know, a week ago or 2 weeks ago or however long, you know, if you give them a couple weeks in between, it's probably not the same ones. You know, all of us run trail cameras for deer. I mean, how many times do you see different coyotes come through within a week on your trail cameras? I run, you know, out there, I run 20 plus trail cameras year round, and you'll see a coyote come through one day, 2 or 3 of them checking on your scrapes or your corn piles or whatever, and the very next day it'll be 2 or 3 different ones. It's just a revolving door. They do have like a 3 to 5 mile radius that they run all the time.
You ever accidentally call in bears? We get so many bears in the state, I call them in just a can call, you know, trying to call deer in.
No, I'm sure with anything in distress, you know how bear is, he's gonna come to it. I'm sure a lot of you has probably called in bear before, because I know the guys that I know out here, they've called in bear with distress calls. I mean, they're an apex predator too. They want a free meal.
How much attention do you pay to scent control and wind direction?
Scent control, that's a loaded question, because at my house, the scent control is, you know, a wide open field. I know he's gonna, you know, if I'm calling a patch of woods and I know the wind's coming from my left or right, most times I'll set up to where I'm shooting straight north and straight west, straight into where I think he's gonna come from. Well, you guys can't do that unless you've got, you know, open fields. Out here, your scent control is much more critical than what it is out there, because of the hollers and, you know, the wind swirling around the points, and you really have to pay attention to what way your wind's going after it leaves you, because, you know, if you're sitting on this ridge and you think they're going to come out this old logging road and the wind's coming from your left or right, well, that wind more than likely is probably blowing right straight down the holler, right back up the point again, because it's just giving you a big swirl. And that's one of the reasons that I even went to Nose Jammer. That's one of the reasons I even called the guy and asked him to sponsor this tournament, is because I think that Nose Jammer for you guys out here it will work phenomenal for you. You spray that stuff, it swirls down the holler. They're not going to smell it. They're not going to get your wind nowhere near what they would without it. You know, wind direction for you is so critical, because you got the swirling winds, as opposed to out there and, you know, in Indiana where I hunt, I don't have to deal with that. I want them to come downwind, because if they're coming downwind, I've got a wide open field there that I know once they get my wind, they're already dead anyway.
You ever use a tree stand?
A tree stand? No, I've never used a tree stand, but, you know, who's to say you can't get up in the tree stand and get a better field of view in the woods?
Makes it a lot easier.
Yep. You know,
Scent control's there with it.
yep, you're elevated. You know, if you got a good snow on and you're in a tree stand, you just helped yourself out, that's for sure.
If your first set or any set doesn't produce, how far do you move, or how far in our area would you move before you call it again?
At least 1,000 yards. Yeah, at least give it 1,000 yards, because even playing the calls at, you know, mid to 3/4 volume, they can hear it at 1,000 yards. They'll come to it from that far. That's why out here, you know, I tell you to, 40, 45 minutes. I would definitely give it 45 minutes on a set out here because, if one hears you at 1,000 yards and he's three ridges away, you got to give him time to get there. And we've all done it. You'll be at 45 minutes and be like, oh, well, nothing's coming in. Go out there, grab your call, pack everything up, take and scan one time. And they're standing there looking at you like, if I'd have gave him 2 more minutes. But, yeah, I would definitely move at least 1,000 yards.
How far do you walk from your side-by-side or truck?
Most times I don't want to walk any farther than I have to. That video, when I grabbed that other magazine, I reached on the bed of my truck and got the magazine. That tells you how in the nighttime they can't see you. I don't know what it is that they can't pick you up. I'm standing there, this is my truck. I'm standing there with the gun. I'm like, oh, I don't have any more shells. They can't see it. For some reason, they just do not acknowledge you at night. That's why we stand in the middle of wide open fields. That call, that first session, that call was 35 yards from us, here to the wall, and all 4 of those came looking straight at us with the snow on and a full moon out. Never knew we were there.
Which hand scanner do you use? I know it's ATN.
Yeah, it's the cheapest one that they have. People talk about getting night vision and getting thermal, and I can tell you right now, if ATN didn't sponsor me and give me that thermal, I would have that thermal on my gun. I'm not paying for that, unless I get it at a good discounted price, because this is the most important thing. The scanner is your most important thing. If you don't, if you go and buy a night vision scope, that is great. But if you don't have a good scanner, you're basically telling yourself that you're going to have to stay on that gun the entire time that you're sitting there, trying to scan with the gun. If I was getting into coyote hunting again, and the first piece of equipment that I would buy, I would rather have a scope with a light attached to it and have a thermal scanner, if that's what I could afford. Because, when I'm sitting here doing this and I'm not on that gun and I got 360 mobility that I can just move around wherever I want to move to, this is a priceless piece. This is just a little tiny 19 millimeter. It's the cheapest OTS that ATM makes. I think they're like $1,000. It's done its job for 4 years now. I've never had a problem out of it. I mean, you can't tell what it is at 400 or 500 yards, but something's there. And if it comes closer, then obviously you're going to be able to tell soon enough. But close quarters, if you're hunting on these roads and you're looking down the roads, or something that they're going to pop out right in front of you, it's hard to see them whenever you're sitting there scanning with your gun, as to where if you had this, you'd pick them up immediately.
Now, does it affect your night vision the way, like your eye vision?
Well, yeah, you can't see anything.
Well, see, I ran into that the other night. I was looking, I've got the X-Sight 4K, and I was scanning with the scope, and when I went to look at my car, I couldn't see what I was moving to.
Well, you should look through thermal, then do that. He said he had thermal. When you pull your eye away from thermal, you can't see anything. It's total blackness. It's just a pixelated blur, because your eye's trying to recover from looking through that bright screen in the dark. It takes sometimes 15, 20 minutes before you get full vision back from looking through thermal.
A good tip is do the pirate trick. Just look through your opposite eye.
Yeah.
So this eye for me is always adjusted to a real bright light, And I never look through this eye, cause if you do, you just shot your whole night vision,
Yeah.
you know, all in pieces. So I either keep one eye closed or
Yeah.
just look through my, you know, my call on my left eye and my scope, all right?
Yeah, that ATN sells thermal binoculars. Don't ever buy those. Because when you pull them down off your eyes, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't see anything. It's like that must have been an engineer that sat in the office and never used thermal before. They decided, hey, we're going to make binoculars.
What kind of calling sequence do you use
For
when you're calling?
so
You can't see them.
so I start
Do
out
you leave your caller on?
continuously. No, I usually stop it. You know, most of your calls now, like all of the old ones, they didn't have a break in it. Like if I get calls from Lucky Duck, I order them from the guy that makes them. His name's Rick Paulette. You can order them from his site. Well, he's got a thing on here. When you get it, it's called Rick's Favorites. So he puts this on there for guys that are starting out, that hasn't been into the industry a long time. He puts his favorite calls on there to help you figure out your calling sequences. He puts all the breaks in there for you. So, you know, his calls will play for a couple minutes and they'll stop for 15 or 20 seconds. And then it'll play. It's got all the breaks in there. You don't want to continuously play and play and play and play. Because they,
I've got one of the older Fox Pros. And, of course, like calling in the mountain. If you don't see them or hear them right away, how long do you leave it?
play it for 2 or 3 minutes and then shut it off for 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, make it sound real. That's the most important thing. Make it sound real. You know, if you let it sit there and play for 10 minutes, that rabbit's out of breath by then.
If you don't have a scanner, you're using a light. You use a light all the whole time scanning?
Whole time. Yep. Yeah, if you got that's the way we all started out. And, you know, you got to sit there. You know, me and my buddy, we're out there in those wide open fields. Me and him would say, "You got from this point to this point. I got from this point to this point." We'd stand back to back and never stop scanning, because the very second that you stop scanning, you're going to turn back around again, and he's going to be standing there looking at the call.
Would you hunt one day and like if you didn't have any luck, anything coming in, could you hunt the next day in the same area?
I don't know if I would go about the next day, because more than likely they're probably still hunting that area. I would give it, you know, a couple weeks in between. It may be, they may stay in that same area and hunt for 4 or 5 days or 6 days, and you're just going to educate them real good then.
Have you noticed that they respond better in the daytime versus nighttime?
Their best response time is obviously right at the edge of dark. You know,
Early morning.
early morning at daylight, right at the edge of dark. That's their most response time, because they're telling each other where they're at. Like, hey, you know, I'm over here and I'm over here. This is where we're hunting at. They're talking. That's what they're doing. You know, when you're sitting in your tree stand during October and it's getting ready to be rut, for some reason that time of the year the coyotes howl more than any other time of the year, and you always sit there with bumps on your arm, like, phew. You know, they're right over the hill and it sounds like there's 10 of them underneath you.
There's been several times where I've hunted kind of public areas like strip mines, and you know there's other people there. I've called in other hunters several, at least 5 times, and they'll come rolling up on their side by side, and I don't know. I've got a thing I downloaded from MFK, and it's like a caution thing, and it plays this human voice really loud and say you're approaching a predator stand. I've never used that, but man, I thought, like, I was sitting here howling, these people ride up on their side by side, and now they're playing their Fox Pro at me. I know exactly the sound they're playing.
I'd be scared to death.
Like, yeah, I set my truck alarm off. I had to, and I was like, I don't know what to do here.
I've never had that happen until last year. we were hunting the Eastern World Tournament, come up on this property, and turned my call on, did my little sequence, and then I howled. Well, I sat there for a few minutes, and I howled again. And I'm total in the dark. I'm all thermal. And I see two guys coming down the field. This is at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I see two guys walking down the field. I'm like, what in the world? You know, they're only 250 yards from me when they popped out. So I'm scared to death now. I'm like, oh my God, I hope they can see where I'm at. I didn't have a light on my head. So I ease out there in the field, grab my call, and start walking back off the field, and their call started howling. And I eased out of there very quietly, but I was scared to death.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
That's the same problem I have, and it worries me.
Anybody else got any more questions?
Do you ever use coyote like the attraction sense?
No.
What about if you put them on like your partner and have a walk around? Do you think there's any effect on how real is?
Might be good for your scent control.
Especially during those 2 weeks. You may or may not shoot today.
Anybody got any more questions?
Do you use any actual coyote decoys, like, not these kind of decoys, but an actual coyote?
No, but I know that those guys have huge success with that out west. You see they have Montana Decoys, I think's the company. They use those, just it looks like a piece of paper. And those coyotes come flying in there to that because they put the call right behind it.
You ever hunt off coyote dogs?
No, I haven't got to do that.
It looks fun.
It looks like a lot of fun. The decoy dogs, I have not got to do that. I would like to. If you follow Colton Gillum out in Wyoming, he does that a lot. So, I got one more, then we can see. I don't know how long he told me I was allowed to have.
20 minutes. Book says 2:30.
I got till 2:30. I'm good then. I got 30 more minutes. So this particular stand, we walk up to the field edge, and so this field runs, and you can see the woods straight north. The field is a big Y. It goes to the right and to the left, and the wind was blowing from the right to the left. So we thought for sure that the coyote was going to come out on the right side of the field. Well, if you can see, by the time I turned the scope on, the coyote was standing underneath my feet. So I got the call running, and I just switched over to the rabbit. I'd already done the mouse and the rodent, and I just switched over to the rabbit, and it's playing at low volume. And I scan across the field, nothing. And I'm standing there at my gun, and I always put my gun like that so that light doesn't reflect off the lens onto me. I'm standing there at my gun, and I scan around, and the coyote was standing at my gun too. He came from behind us. He walked in between me and my partner. So he's standing right there. He runs out in front of us, turns back around, looks at me again, and then by that time I got on the gun and got him killed. But one of the things I wanted to share with you on this is when we walked into that field, we walked by the patch of woods that he was in, and we never even looked at it with the thermal. we thought there's no way there's going to be a coyote in that little tiny patch of woods, which was, you know, about one section of the auditorium. If you go to whatever property that you're going to go to, make sure you, as soon as you step out of the truck, you know, whether you're with a light, whether you're with your, you know, your night vision or your thermal or whatever, scan where you're going to walk. Because I learned something really quick here. You know, we could have missed out on this because it would have took 2 seconds to turn the scanner on and look at the field before we entered the field. So, you know, if you're getting off your side-by-side or getting out of the truck, as soon as you step your feet on the ground, scan the area, but even before you start walking, because they could be standing there looking at you. So, you probably notice every one of these videos, right before I shoot the coyotes, I howl at them like that. And basically, the only reason that I do that is for one, to stop them, but the other reason is to get their attention to turn back around to me and give me a broadside shot. Because it seems like every single time that you howl at them, you know, you can make any kind of noises that you want, but if you howl at them, they usually square up on you, and you're able to get you a broadside shot. Just a tip. That just shows you how tough they are. That first one was right in the shoulder, the second one was right behind the shoulder, and that thing still didn't go down. That's how tough those things are. Any more questions?
When you mentioned hunting right by your truck, obviously you got slamming doors and tailgates and stuff like that. How long do you sit there until you start?
We try to be as quiet as possible. Okay. We step out. You know, we're easing the doors shut, trying to ease all of our stuff out. And, you know, we try to be as quiet as possible because you never know what might be standing there. But you know, by the time you get out of the truck, and even if you walk, you know, 50 yards, and you get your call out of your bag, and you get your gun set up on the tripods, you know, there's a 10-minute window there before you ever even think about setting the call out. Questions? No questions?
If you
What
could
kind of
just tell
tips you
us.
have for weather, like last year, you know, it poured rain down pretty much all night, there was one of those.
If you look at that weather again and it says it's going to pour the rain the whole time, I would have me a backup plan. You know, last year that was the worst possible weather you could have, 24 hours of straight rain. You know, you might want to, you know, I don't know if it's legal in West Virginia or not to pick up roadkill, but I might suggest that you find you a bait pile, because, you know, getting out in that pouring rain, you know, you never know what might come into that bait pile overnight, rather than, you know, sitting inside of a ground blind and staying dry, rather than sitting out there in the pouring rain and not seeing anything. But, you know, I hope we got snow, then we got rain. I hope this year we have decent weather. That would be really nice, just to have some decent weather.
What time of the day or night do you feel you best?
What was it?
What time of the day or night, or what time do you see the have most luck?
If I'm hunting at night, I like to be there at dark. You know, as soon as it gets dark, I usually don't walk into the fields when it's daylight. I'll wait till it gets, you know, at least enough to where it's total darkness on the field, up until about, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning. That seems to be my primo time. After 1 o'clock in the morning, they've already had that length of time to feed. You know, you catch him right at dark, he's hungry, and they're more susceptible to come in. You start getting in those wee hours of the morning, you know, unless he's a really bad hunter, he's already had a lot to eat by that point.
What
they're stirring the whole time. And that's the reason that, you know, any that you kill during that time period, they don't have any hair left on them, because they've ran so hard, and with everything that's going on, you look at their bellies, they don't have any hair on them, their tails are hairless. They run for 2 solid weeks. They're like an old deer.
What about as far as like if you don't have thermal, you're just trying to cover the light?
Again, scan the whole time. I mean, you know, if you got a light on your gun, you really need a light in your hand. You know, we used to hunt with lights. You know, we bought that back then. Wicked had a little light set that you could get a handheld light and a light to mount on your gun. That was a really nice set because you could have your gun sitting there ready to go and sit there and scan with your light until you see something and then go to your gun. And the other thing too with lights, you don't, once you locate them, you know, you scan around and you see eyes, you know, immediately raise that light up off those eyes. Don't leave the light on their eyes because they'll catch on to that in a second. The only thing you want to do is be able to see that coyote. You don't want to put it on him to where, you know, you're sending a signal out there. If you keep it, you know, the main part of the beam 10 feet over top of him, you're still going to be able to see him, and you're not giving him that direct contact with the light. That's one of the biggest things too. When we was hunting with lights, we had to figure that part of it out. You know, you get your light and you're like, cool, you know, there's a coyote, and you're just like holding it right on his face the whole time until you figure out that they can see that. It doesn't matter if you got red, green, whatever. If you put it on them, they can see it. That's why they. Yeah, you got to constantly scan. You know, I'm worse than anybody. You know, I'm sitting here and I got, you know, my scanner on. And I know this thing so well now, I usually don't even have to look at it anymore. I pretty much know where everything is as far as the buttons. So, you know, most of the time I'm scanning continuously, and I got my call down here. I don't even look at the buttons, and I never stop scanning because so many times that, you know, you'll take the scanner down and be like, you know, there's nothing there, and look down at the call and change your sequence and raise it back up, and you're like, oh my God, it's right there. If you can't get to your gun quick enough, it's gone. I want to play a few sounds that I would use over this period, just to give you an idea, because everybody's sounds is different. You know, Lucky Duck ain't Fox Pro, and Fox Pro isn't Icotech. That's pretty much what everybody has. So this would after I get done, you know, with the mouse, with you know, my rabbit, if I play my rabbit, or you know, whatever your food source may be. I don't always play a rabbit. Out there, most times you can get away with the rabbit. Well, you get in areas that, you know, it gets hunted a lot and gets pressured. Everybody plays the rabbit. So most of the educated ones won't come into it because he's already heard it 10 times. But this would be my call sequence. So on this particular call, it's called an LH. Rick has 14 coyotes in his pen out there, and he records all these vocals in a recording studio. So he takes those coyotes into his recording studio, and he creates these sounds. That's the reason that I use this. Their speakers isn't the best. Icotech's got the best speaker in the business. It's so crisp and clear, but Rick's sounds is better than everybody else. They sound so realistic that that's the reason that I use it. And I break this up. You know, and I'll pause that right there. It's going to go through rest of this howling sequence, you know, is what he's got programmed in here. But I break it up and make it sound realistic. You know, I've never been out there and heard a coyote do that and then just keep going and going and going. You know, they usually have a pause in there, or they'll have a time period where they're like, you know, trying to figure out if somebody else wants to talk to them. So I've done my female now, and you know, I'll rotate that call around. My call's about rotated out. It won't hardly do it anymore. But then I'll go to my male and play it in the totally opposite direction. And I play those two because they sound similar. You can set the females. They're very similar in their calls between the male and the female as far as how long they draw them out and how the barks are in there with them. So I'll do that, and I'll sit there for a couple minutes, and at the bottom of my screen it's got a timer on there, and I'll sit and I'll wait till it says 2 minutes. That seems like that's what works for me. It's not, it may not be right, but that's what works for me. Then I'll play it again. Different sound, same coyote. See, at the end of that, he lets out a little bark, and I follow that up. So now we're going to sit here for a couple minutes. If I don't get anything to answer me, you know, nobody's wanting to talk, I'll follow it up with this. And this is just a challenge is all it is. It's the same coyote. All that is a challenge to anything that's in the area saying, you know, I'm over here. So if nothing happens with that, then I'm going to go to this time of the year, the breeding sequence. So you'll hear this in the woods this time of the year. You know, you can go out in the nighttime, the coyotes will all get fired up, and you hear some weird sound out there, and you're like, what in the world is that? And it's a female coyote is what it is. They make some of the weirdest, craziest noises that you'll ever hear this time of the year. Just you know, you'd never think that's going to call in a coyote, but this is one of the most used calls this time of the year. I'll let that do it 2 or 3 times, and I'll sit there for another few minutes. And then I'll play that same sequence again. And then, you know, if nothing happens with those chirps, go to the whimpers. And that's basically saying that, you know, that they found each other. If somebody would have told me years ago that that's going to call in a coyote, I would have told them that's crazy, because that makes no sense whatsoever if you don't know exactly what they're saying. It's that open mind that you're gonna be able to kill coyotes. You know, these calls are on here from guys that has done it for years and years and years. They know what they're doing, and they know, you know, what sounds it takes to get it done. You know, those guys on Fox Pro Fur Takers and, you know, Lucky Duck and Jeff Nimick and Rick, you know, you couldn't think about how many coyotes that they killed to be able to come up with the sound sequences that they have. You know, they're in here for a reason, and if you keep an open mind and use them, they're going to work for you. So, you know, I've played all that, nobody shows up, then the very last thing that I do on every single stand that I go to is on this call, it's called a schoolyard brawl. It's a pup distress call. I let that run for 5 solid minutes. I don't never stop it. Because once they hear that, I wish I would have pulled some videos off the other ones, you know, at a long distance. I have one on here right now, but it has some foul language on there. Because the guy that asked me to come and take him hunting, we called these coyotes in. We seen him at like 600-700 yards coming across this field. They got out to about 500 yards and they hung up on us and they would not come in. I put that on and they came from 500 yards in about 2 or 3 minutes. They were standing 20 yards in front of us, and he was cussing like a sailor whenever he started shooting at it. He killed 3 of them, but I can't play it. But that's what pup distress will do for you. If they're out there and they've even thought about coming in, you put that on, you give it 5 minutes. If they don't show up, they're not showing up, or they're going to be sitting in your lap grabbing hold of your call. A couple of years ago, we were setting up. There was a roll to the hill. We set the call right on that roll to the hill, so it was real close quarters. There was only about a 50-yard shot there, and my buddy Joey, he got a shotgun, and I had the rifle. And it's right at the edge of dark. We thought we was going to slip in there, and you know, little patch of woods. We thought we'd slip in there with the shotgun since it was so close quarters. You know, rifle was pretty much unusable at that point. We was going to call these coyotes up out of there. So, you know, everything's right here in front of us. Put the call out, start playing, nothing. Playing, nothing. Playing, nothing. Went through everything that we had, nothing. They didn't make a whimper, they didn't make a sound, they didn't do anything. We put pup distress on. I'm looking over through here, you know, I got my little section. You know, if it's me and my buddy, we usually sit side by side and we break it up. Be like, from here, this way's mine, here, this way's yours. That way you're not sitting there, you know, looking around at the same thing your buddy just looked at. I'm sitting here looking around and all I hear was the teeth hitting the call. And you could hear when he bit into the call went up in the air. I turn around, about the time I turn around, I see the call flipping in the air, and the other one come through behind it and grabbed a hold of it and threw it up in the air again. They attacked that pup distress thinking that was a pup in distress, and we ended up getting one of them, but that's the mentality that they have. They sat there over top of that bank, you know, they was probably 50 yards from the call that whole time, never made a sound, wouldn't come in, but when you play that, it triggers something in them. It's like, I'm coming or not. I mean, most of the time, if they're anywhere around, they're going to come when you play it.
Why don't you just lead off with it then?
Because if you lead off with it from that point on, you've pretty much just done yourself in if anything's coming in long distance. Because, you know, you could lead off with it, but the only thing is, if something's out there, at the 1,000-yard mark, and he hears that, well, by the time he would get there from 1,000 yards, if you played it over and over and over, then more than likely you're not going to be able to get him in because he's going to figure it out during that time period. That's the reason, the whole sequence that I go through is just, for close quarters, for stuff that's out there a little farther away, and then stuff that's long distance. That coyote that grabbed that call, he may have been, 500 or 1,000 yards away. And maybe they got all the way up there and they didn't, I don't like what I'm hearing until you play that. Not saying that you couldn't play that, it's very well possible, you might go out there and play that 10 times and you may kill, or you may call them in, half the time just off of that particular call, especially, this time of the year when this is all going on. But, it's difficult to say that you could or could not use it at the beginning of a set. I just like using it at the end of the set, just for the simple fact that, if they hang up, they're going to come on that.
tell us exactly where they are, that'd be great.
In the woods.
Yeah.
Do you ever use diaphragm calls?
Yeah, yep. I just started using diaphragms. I would put one in my mouth right now, but you would laugh at me because I've just got to the point where I can really howl with it really well, but I can't do anything else with it.
I got you.
So,
I know your struggles.
yeah, it's, calling in a turkey, I can call with the best of them. But putting that diaphragm in there and trying to learn how to bark with it at the top of your mouth, it's so frustrating. But I do like the diaphragm call just because it makes the sound so realistic.
It's unique.
Yep. Yeah, it's not like you're playing
Exactly,
the same sound
yeah.
over and over and over. It's the uniqueness of
Everybody's
what you're
different
doing.
too.
Yep.
You call, with a mouth call, when you, let's say you wanna do the female and then the male response, if you didn't have a caller that turned, you could use a mouth call to respond and give you a different location slightly.
You watch, those videos from those guys down at MFK. They get in the woods, they hunt in the daytime a lot. You'll see them do that. They'll sit in this location and turn their call on, and you'll see them turn around and make their mouth calls that way to make them think that, totally opposite areas because, the Fox Pro doesn't turn. But they'll do that manually, and they'll do it with their hand mouth calls.
How do you set up with, you was talking about your friend Joey was using a shotgun. How do you set up when one has a rifle, one has a shotgun? How do you set the shotgun up?
I usually, if one of us has a rifle and one has a shotgun, the shotgunner's in the front. That way, I'm out of his way. I don't want to be, if we think that he's going to be shooting in this area, he's right here. He's up in front of me because if it happens with the shotgun, it's going to happen quick. That's the reason that we got it. It's going to pop right up and there it is. But if you see him with the rifle, then you've got enough time to be able to get on the rifle and, out there at a longer distance.
It has a gun-mounted red lens or
Although
something
this is
on it?
right at the edge of dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're using one at night, would you use a red lens on it?
I haven't used one at night, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep. We'll have to get into it though because evidently Kentucky's not going to pass their law to use rifles.
How long do you wait for that bell response?
2 or 3 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes if they haven't howled by then. And two, I've had some of my best nights ever and one never make a peep. It's some of those nights they're so vocal, and some nights you can't get them to say anything, but they come to everything you throw at them.
I mean, if you're trying to call,
Yeah.
you still wait 2, 3 minutes?
Yeah, spin it around and go the other direction, wait a few minutes and answer them back and, just make it sound realistic. That's what you want to do. Anybody else?
What part of Illinois you in?
I'm in Cincinnati. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. Yep. I'm originally from here. I'm from Big Ugly. I don't know if you know where Big Ugly is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Big Ugly boy. Yep. I moved to Cincinnati 15 years ago. And, I'm here a lot. I come back a lot. 99% of my friends are here, and so I put a lot of miles on my truck because West Virginia is still my home and my heart. So I'm here a lot. Everybody always does something fun here, and out there they don't do that. Everybody at Real Deal, we're having a antler party this weekend, or somebody's doing a shed hunt, or somebody's always doing something here. Out there, they're a little sluggish.
Do you hunt every day very often or ever?
Yeah, I used to.
Is that a good way to get into it? There's plenty of deer parks on the side of the road.
Yep, it's a great way to get into it. I mean, if you're going out there, especially when it's super cold and windy, and You know, you wanna go out and have something to do when deer season's out. Well, hunting over a bait pile is just as fun, because, I mean, bottom line is, it's when you see a coyote, that's where you get your adrenaline rush, whether he's coming into that or whether you're calling him in. Yeah, I've left here before, just a couple of years ago, when I was hunting those tournaments, you know, man, we would do anything to win those tournaments. I'd leave here, and as soon as I'd hit the Ohio border, I'd have that little Ford Ranger. By the time I got home, it would have deer legs sticking out of it everywhere. I had the state police pull me over a few years ago, and we had a big tournament out there. You know, we won like 5 straight big tournaments, and that would always be our backup plan. You know, if we had bad weather, we had an old trailer out there, and we'd have us a carcass pile. We'd start putting that stuff on that carcass pile 2 months ahead of time, and we had the state road. The guys that picked all the deer up off the state road, we had them dumping them for us. So, you know, I'd leave here, and state police pulled me over one day. He said, "What in the world are you doing with all these deer?" He called the game warden. It was after season. I said, "Buddy, these have all been hit by the road." He's like, "Are you kidding me?" He reached back there and grabbed a hold of one of them, pulled its leg, and it was just like the smell. Completely not. He was like, he told me I was sick. He was like, "You're sick for even doing this." And I'm not losing that coyote tournament. Anybody else? You gotta have questions. I mean,
You like skyline chili?
it's okay. All right, if anybody don't have anything else, I really appreciate you guys coming out, and we'll be over there in our booth if you want to come talk some more.